Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Garrus and today we're going to be doing the top 10 tracks to master in Mario Kart Deluxe. Whether you're just looking to try and get better at the game in general, or you're looking to get into competitive Mario Kart, these are the tracks you want to master to try and outdo your competition. Let's get started with number 10. And number 10 is Mount Wario. So this track is one of the best runners in the entire game. You've got these 3 coins at the beginning, which really help get your coin count when you're in the front early, so that you can progressively get further and further ahead of your competition. And the driving on this track is actually fairly simple, despite the difficult sections that are going to be in later on. This section right here is pretty difficult. You want to drift off here and hold your drift so that you can trick off here, get a launch trick here, get a little landing drift to the right there. And if you pause and, focus on that section, that's a very good section to learn. But the rest of the track, besides the tree section here, is fairly simple and doable as well. So what I like to do here for the tree section is just aim for this log first, come down here, and get, up to 4 tricks. You can go tight to the tree if you want. But you want to aim for that first log so it can line you up really nicely for the rest of the section. And then here the rest of the track is really simple. Lap 3 is probably the easiest lap to drive in the entire game, and well, maybe not the entire game, but definitely out of the front runners and out of the main front runners, this is one of the simplest tracks to drive at the end. So you can even do this if you'd like to try and get double and get these 3 rings. Save a little bit of time if you do that. And at the end, of course, you can get an SMT and finish the track like this. So that was number 10 in Mount Wario. Let's move on to number 9. And at number 9, we got Coconut Mall. This track is actually really hard to drive if you're trying to do it optimally. But there are a few things you can do to make it simpler on yourself. And yeah, we can go over that real quick. So, obviously there's the cut to the right that you can do off the bat. You can get these coins here. And there's 2 things you can go for on this track. You can go for this middle section, which is pretty difficult to do. But once you get it down, it's not too hard. And the top path is another place where you can, do some fair bit of improving in terms of your lines. You want to go for that Ultra Mini Turbo Glider off there. And here, the path switch on lap 2. So you actually want to go down the middle here. Of course, you want to optimally get the trick there, but that trick's pretty difficult. You can come pretty tight here. If you want to get the double, you can go for this side and trick off like this. And to go bottom, you can go under here like this. You can even get a launch trick like so. And the rest of the track is not too bad. Now, of course, you want to learn how to do this track online because... Oh, missed the trick. Sometimes you do miss that, by the way. There's a couple things like the build extension. You can actually build in the cut, or you can build a little bit before the cut or down the middle of the stairs. And that will take you all the way, I believe, to right here. And that's a really good build extension. Of course, the double's right here as well. But a lot of this track comes down to decision making and your lines when it comes to, leading up to the shortcut or, on these stairs. You want to be able to get the tricks and as many tricks as you possibly can while still, being aware of your surroundings and using your items well. So that is Coconut Mall at number 9. And at number 8, we got Ribbon Road. Now this track is not really a runner, and it's actually not picked too often in competitive play, but this track is very important to learn because of these launch tricks. You gotta learn how to take those sections well, because then you can take over many spots compared to your competition. What you want to do is you want to drift just as you get to the top part of that ramp. And then you want to release your drift or your mini turbo right as you're about to go off the boost ramp. And these sections right here are also very important to learn. And knowing how to take each cycle is very, very important. And knowing where to look exactly so that you know which cycle it is also really, really important. So that's all going to be up to you, the viewer, to figure out exactly how to do that. But what I like to do, I'll show you later, is I like to look where I am in the air. So I'll show you exactly what I mean. So right here, when you trick off in the air, you can actually look ahead of you to see what kind of pattern you're going to be facing coming up to the Nisk. So here, I'm thinking, okay, I could probably do a MT trick off the road and go through the Nisk like that. So just recognizing those patterns on this track is very, very good to know. And of course, you got the shroom cut at the end, which saves a bunch of time. And yeah, this track in general is fairly difficult. But, you know, once you get it down, you're going to be so much better than your competitors. And it's actually a lot simpler to drive than you might think. It's just, you know, it's kind of daunting at first if you're like a casual player trying to play this track, because there's just so many different, you know, moving parts, and it's very hard to just know exactly where to go at all times. So yeah, that was Ribbon Road at number 8. Let's move on to number 7. So at number 7, we got DK Summit. Now, of course, this got added with Wave 4 of the Boost Course Pass. This is one of those tracks where it's very important to learn specific parts of this track and how they work. So this half pipe upcoming is very important to learn. So what you want to do here, when you go up this pipe, you want to click R when you're in the air, so that you can go a lot tighter than you would normally go. I'll show you exactly what I mean next time. So you go very wide if you don't click R on the half pipe, if you don't get very lucky air like I just did there. So here's what happens when you don't click R in the air. See, it sends you really, really far wide like this. So when you click R in the air, I don't know why exactly it does that. I don't know why exactly it makes you go tighter. It just does. And you want to do the same thing for every time you go off the half pipe into the air. So even on these little hops, you still want to be pressing R so you can be a little bit closer to the half pipe when you land, and you don't go so far out to the side. Now I'm going to break down exactly how you do the double in a little bit, but of course you got that shroom cut just below us that you want to take, and yeah, you want to know how to run and bag this track, because it's very important to know the popular shock spots, which is, you know, basically the target shock in the gap or chaining into that second set. So here, how you want to take the double is you basically want to release your mini turbo just as you're about to approach this little chasm here. You want to do it probably around here. So you see this like little blue line. You want to release there and then drift off like this into the gap, and you will make it every single time. Now it takes a little bit of practice, and you're actually going to do some of it on your own. But of course, like I said, I have a track tutorial in the description. And yeah, DK Summit at number 7. Let's move on to number 6. And at number 6, we got Piranha Plant Slide. This is by far one of the most important tracks to learn. And it's a very, very good runner if you can master it and, you know, pick it for yourself in first. Now, of course, we got plenty of tech to go over. That first part being the Kusan slide at the beginning. What you want to do is drift to the left and hold to the right so you can get that sort of funky air that I get. And there's a lot of different tech you can go for on this track. That's pretty unnecessary, but that's one of the things you can do while you're in first. And you don't have to necessarily do it in first, but if you do and you can master it, of course it's going to be very, very good for you, and you can break away fairly easily. Now, of course, you got this cut at the end as well, but this track is actually fairly hard despite not having too much tech to master. So, you know, of course, you can go middle there at the beginning, and that gives you the 3 coins. It's not really necessary to do it laps 2 and 3, but you can do it. This part is very important to learn because, you know, you can get that sort of entry like that, where you go a little bit too tight or you go a little bit too wide, and you can really mess that up and potentially like fall off if you're not careful. So yeah, that's basically it for Piranha Plant Slide. I think the biggest thing to learn on this track is just how to keep yourself, you know, safe and make sure that you don't really get bumped off or get bumped to the side. Here on lap 3, you can actually go inside of that Piranha Plant, but it's very risky, and I would not go for it online unless you're really confident in yourself to do that. So you want to make sure you get a little bit of air off that entry into the set so that you don't go too tight there. And the way you do that is you just basically drift off the red block, and that usually will give it to you. You can do an SMT off this glider, but it's not very necessary. This track is just a good, solid, all-around runner, and you can pick it for either you or your team if you're in top spots. Let's move on to number 5. So before we move on to number 5, I would like to get some honorable mentions in. So the first honorable mention, Excite Bike Arena. And as you saw, I was actually time trialing the last 5 tracks, but these next 3 in the honorable mentions are actually best to be practiced in versus mode. And I know you don't really hear that a lot, but basically the whole point here is Excite Bike Arena has not completely random ramps, but I believe there's 4 sets of ramps that you can encounter online and in versus mode. So it's very important to master all the cycles you can get and really how you can drive each set and how you can chain into the shrooms into set and get out of the cut like this. It's very important to know how to do each part of that. And this is obviously, if you've watched any competitive Mario Kart at all, you know that this is one of the most popular tracks in competitive Mario Kart. So it's very important to learn this track and how to do the cuts and how to take the ramps in particular for every single setup. So this might be a little bit of a, you know, a different sort of track that you're used to when people tell you what tracks to practice for, but you're going to encounter this a lot in Lounge, which is the most popular solo format, and you're going to be playing in almost every single Lounge event that you play. So it's going to be important to learn, not only because it's a difficult track and there's a lot of things you have to account for, but also, you know, for the fact that you're going to be playing this quite often if you do play competitive Mario Kart. So you can also, you know, you want to be drifting off the ramps if you go basically into the air, and you want to be tricking off the ramps where you get lower air or where there isn't very many ramps at all. So yeah, it's pretty complicated to, you know, explain exactly what I mean in terms of the ramp strats, but it's very important to, you know, basically just practice them on your own. Watch other top players, see how they take you know, each set of ramps, because you're not always going to be encountering the same ramps in every single race, even on this track. So it's going to be very important to know how to improvise, know how to go fast on, you know, different types of ramps, because even though there's 4 different types, it's good to know exactly what kind of setups and, you know, link those patterns together, that sort of thing. So this is the first honorable mention. We're going to move on to... And for the next honorable mention, we have Dolphin Shoals. Now, this one is a little bit different in terms of what you want to practice. Of course, there's no randomness in terms of like the ramps on this track, or the eel, for example. But you do want to master something on this track and the next track that's going to be in the honorable mentions, and it is the motion glider. So this one is not as important as the next track on this list to master in terms of the motion glider, but it is fairly important if you are at that upper echelon. You know, if you're a more advanced player, and you're, let's say you're like tier CD in Lounge, right? And you're a gold player, something like that. this is very important to try and get down. So as you saw what I just did there, I kind of just did it through muscle memory. I meant to actually just pause. But basically what you want to do is find an exact point on the track where you want to turn on Motion Glider. So here, for Dolphin Shoals, I prefer to do the exact ramp before, because I don't like to have too much time with motion controls on, with how I'm set up. But basically, you want to be able to turn motion controls on, and then here, what you want to do is drift and hold up and to the left, and also use your stick to go in that direction. So that way you can take the glider like this, and you'll usually save lots of time compared to just doing a regular glider cut, which I'm sure you've also seen before. But this is a technique that you want to master if you're getting to the more upper echelon of competitive Mario Kart, so that you can really, really outdo your opponents in those areas, so that way you save up loads of time, because Motion Glider on this track and the next track coming up is very, very important. And so for the last and final honorable mention, we have Mario Kart Stadium. Now, of course, this is the most famous Motion Glider technique that you'll be using on the racetrack. And this is probably the most important... Oh, I still have it on. And it's also probably the most important to learn. So, the reason why I say this is because, well, on this track... Oh, I kind of got pushed. On this track, it's actually much easier than on, say, Dolphin Shoals or even Coconut Mall, which you can do Motion Glider at the end of that track as well. But that's not nearly as important as the rest of the track. But either way, for Mario Kart Stadium, this has a pretty universal spot where you want to turn on Motion Glider, which is right after you trick. So right after you trick off the glider, it's going to lift you up a little bit. So if you're fast enough with your hands, I actually don't have my controller mapped, so you can do this even if you don't have it mapped. Is you turn on motion right as you trick, and then instantly hold up. And then when you get to a certain point, you can shroom, and then hold your controller to the left in real life. And you can, steer that way, and it saves loads of time compared to just taking the regular shortcut, or compared to taking the glider cut normally. And as long as you know or remember to turn it off at the end of the race, you can do that, and it'll save you loads and loads of time at the end of the track and gain you tons of spots. You can also, as well for Dolphin Shoals, there's also a certain point where you can, in the air, turn it off. So for Dolphin Shoals, it would have been exactly where I turned off motion in the last track. But here, where you want to turn off motion is... Oh. You want to turn it off right as you enter this state right here, where you're kind of like floating in the air and you're about to go into the finish line. This is where you want to turn off motion if you are basically want to get into the next lap, safely without, running into any walls or, being stuck on the ground and having to be in the pause menu, which would slow you down. Since you're in the air while you're on the glider, you're actually not going to be slowed down when you're in the menu. So you can do that on Dolphin Shoals as well, at basically the exact same spot, if you want to do that on laps 1 and 2, but it's much harder to do that, obviously, because you have to coordinate turning it off and then turning it on when the race is still going on. And that is the last of the honorable mentions. And at number 5, we got DK Jungle. Now this track has some very, very important tech that you need to get down, but it is much easier than the rest of the tracks on this list, in my opinion. So the first tech is the Drift Cancel Super Bounce. Now, of course, Super Bounces itself are a whole another tech, but if you don't know how to do that, I recommend... I will probably have a video down below to recommend to you guys to learn how to Super Bounce if you are unfamiliar. But it's very important to learn the Drift Cancel Super Bounce and this part with the ramp. So what you want to do is drift off the first ramp, and then release your mini turbo in midair off the second ramp, and then trick off the last ramp. And then you will be on your merry way. And the rest of the track is fairly simple in terms of driving. You can get a little MT low glider if you'd like. And if you don't know what a low glider is, you're basically just pressing R as you go off the glider a little bit before your glider would normally release by itself. So here, you know, drift cancel, super bounce, very important to learn that. So essentially what you want to do, it's basically in the name. You want to drift off the branch and cancel it midair, start another drift to do a super bounce. Now this is going to take a lot of practice to learn exactly what the alignment is and how you want to take the cut, but there's a good example of how you do the world record cut. You actually get a box there and do a world record cut at the same time. I don't know if I'll have a clip for it, but you can just trust me on that. You can take the little single on the right. But yeah, that is DK Jungle for number 5. This track is much harder than the 6 through 10 on this list, and every track above this is also way harder than Donkey Kong Jungle. Let's move on to number 4. And at number 4, we got Tick-Tock Clock. Now, this track feels way more like a sectional track than even some DLC tracks because of how it functions in terms of how the driving is. So, you know, on lap 1, you want to go middle here by going through the little hand. And here you have to know the cycles. You have to be able to locate where the gong is going to be so you know what lines to take. This track overall is just very, very difficult. And it's fairly hard to learn as well. You just have to know the cycles, and you have to know exactly where you're going on each lap. So here, the cycle lets me take this Nisk, which you can do like so. That's a more simplified way of doing it, by the way. You can do it a much more complicated way, but I wouldn't recommend doing it that way, but I will show you how to do it. So here on lap 2, you don't have any, you know, middle path to go for. So you can go for this right path, or left path, sorry, and trick off the little clock hand. Get this launch trick here. A lot of this is very technical driving, but not anything super crazy. It's just a very long track of complicated tech, or of simple tech, throughout this complicated track. So here on lap 2, if you're fast enough, you can actually go for this lap 2 Nisk, and you can actually hop through here, and of course, take the Nisk like so. That was a little bit more scuffed of a version, but you don't really want to go for that if you've ever gotten hit out. And here, you can actually go through the middle on time trials, but I wouldn't recommend you doing it online unless you have a very, very big break in first and you haven't been hit by anything yet. Otherwise, I would just not recommend going for it. And on lap 3, you can actually do the Nisk once again. Now, this one's a little bit different and very, very different compared to laps 2 and 1, which is you just want to... Oh, okay, well, you guys get the general idea. You basically want to get an SMT and then MT trick off that last ramp and go off that right cog at the end. So it's left, right, then right for laps 1, 2, and 3 for these last cogs. So let me show you how to do the faster version of the lap 1 Nisk. So how you want to do the Nisk is you want to hold wide until you get closer to the clock hand, hold tight, hop, hop, and you can get it like that. And you can get a little bit better than I just did, but if you just hop twice, you'll oftentimes make the Nisk like that. I don't like to do it just because sometimes I get bumped off, or, you know, I want to be more steady for that section. But if you're confident enough with yourself to do it, by all means go for it. It's a very fast way of doing the Shrimless shortcut there. And yeah, that is it for Tick-Tock Clock. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3, we got Mushroom Gorge. This track, I believe for casuals, is probably one of the hardest in the entire game. And, you know, especially if you don't know how to do the super bounce, this is one of the best tracks in the entire game to learn how to do the super bounce. Well, the super bounce technique. And I'll explain exactly how to do it right now, actually. So, let's say you're coming up to this ramp, right? What you want to do on lots of parts in this track, and in lots of super bounces in general, is have quite a bit of space to one side. So what do I mean by that? So you want to make sure that you line yourself up so that you are going to land on the opposite side of where you're drifting on that side of the mushroom. So let's say you're drifting to the right. You want to be making it so that you get to the leftmost part of the mushroom, so you have the most room to go diagonally to do that super bounce. So for Mushroom Gorge, I want to be lining myself up so that I land on the left part of this first mushroom. So I go on the left side of this ramp, drift off, hold very far right, and just trust in that as much as I can. And then when you're about to land on the mushroom, release your mini turbo and trick at the same time. And you get a little launch, which is, you know, the part of the super bounce. And you want to do this for all the mushrooms, essentially, on this track. Here at the end, what we want to do is trick off the green mushroom, and then start a drift off the red mushroom, get a super bounce onto the middle mushroom, and trick over the last mushroom. And then, of course, the gap cut, one of the most important shortcuts to master in the entire game. That is how you do it if you want to go just normally. You want to essentially just release your mini turbo into the gap, and then hop as late as you possibly can without falling into the gap before you release. So how you do the fence gap, which is actually going over the fence, is you want to make sure that you release and hop as late as possible, because otherwise you won't make it. And you want to aim for that very left part of the ramp, or I guess the gap ramp, whatever you want to call it, so that way you can actually get the air itself as well and not be too far to the right when you entering into the gap jump. So that's how you do the regular gap cut and the fence gap cut. And the rest of the track is actually not too bad. It's just a lot of super bounces and getting the right alignments for them, which is not all bad. I mean, it's not like a super hard technique, the super bounce, but if you're starting out, it is very daunting to try and get this mushroom section correctly. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, will just trick off this and they won't be in a very good line to do the super bounce at the end. And yeah, a lot of people fear doing the gap cut as well. So yeah, Mushroom Gorge at number 3. Let's move on to number 2. So at number 2, I've got Waluigi Stadium, and a lot of people I know will probably be arguing in the comment section below, saying that this is number 1. But I like to think of this track and the next one as more of like a 1A, 1B type situation. And the reason why Waluigi Stadium is up so high is because this was considered the most technical track in the entire game for the entire game's lifespan so far. I mean, you have this ramp strat, you have, you know, even what seems simple, this part right here is actually super complicated. You have to soft drift that anti-grav section if you want to get that part correctly and get the super mini turbo. And of course, you got this double ramp here at the end that you want to double SMT off of. And then you got this glider, you can get the first turn UMT. This whole track is just filled with tech that you have to learn how to do. And of course, you don't have to do all this tech, but the things you do have to do are this ramp strat here, which I will teach real quick. So here what you want to do, drift tight in this section, and then drift right off the first ramp and left off the second ramp. Now, of course, that doesn't sound too complicated, and it's actually not too bad if you want to do it that way, but there's an even more advanced way to do that ramp strat, and I will explain these 3 ramps as well. But essentially, what you want to do is you want to flick to the left, or flick to the opposite side. So for the first ramp, you'd be drifting to the right and flicking to the left, and for the second ramp, you'd be drifting to the left and flicking to the right. And you only do the flick for like a quarter of a second. And then you want to, again, hold that same side. So flick for a little bit, flick for like a quarter of a second, and you will get the ramp strat very well and much better than just doing a normal ramp strat. So here with these 3 ramps at the end, you want to drift off this first one, release your mini turbo mid-air, and then go off the last two ones normally, and drift off the last one to get that double SMT. And that is essentially Waluigi Stadium. Let's move on to number 1. So the number 1 track in the game to master in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is Waluigi Stadium. Every single part of this track has tech to master. It is by far, in a way, the most tech-heavy track in the entire game now that the booster course is out. And you'll even see pro players mess up quite a bit on this track. So if you can master this track in your own lobbies, you will excel to the maximum. Every single part of this track has tech to it. And, like, there's just not much else to say. Like, I have a track tutorial on YouTube for this track as well, if you want to see me go more in depth. But I'm not going to explain absolutely everything here, but you want to launch trick off these ramps. And what do I mean by launch trick? Well, it's basically you just get an MT trick and flick to the side that you want to like drift into if you want to get more of an extra boost and momentum. And then you just saw how I did the cut there. You can get the coin in that little tire too. And just like on DK Summit, you want to be doing the half pipes where you press R when you're in the air, so you can take the half pipes even tighter, I guess. And here at the end, you want to drift off like so to get a super mini turbo. And if you can master this track, you will be so fast compared to everyone. And I guarantee you, if you are in your lobbies and you're playing this track, if you can master how to do this shortcut, if you can master how to do the UMT method of this shortcut, which I will show in a little bit, but it's really up to preference whether you want to do the UMT method or the MT trick method, and I'll show how to do both in a little bit. But just in general, this track is by far and away the most technical track, but it's not nearly as popular as Waluigi Stadium, which is why I consider it a more 1A, 1B type of situation. So, I'll show you guys how to do the Shroomless shortcut. So I'll show you first how to do the MT trick method, which is the way I prefer to do it, but I know a lot of people prefer the UMT method because it's simpler. But essentially, you trick off here, drift to the left, hold wide, and get a launch trick, hop into the dirt like this, and you exit like so. And you'll get it almost every time if you follow those simple instructions. I know, very simple. But honestly, the more you practice all of these tracks, the more simple it's going to be for you. And honestly, Mario Kart, in terms of driving, of course, is one of the most difficult, games to even get the tech right. But with lots of practice, you can, and if you can master these tracks, you'll be so much better than everyone on the racetrack. And yeah, let me explain how to do the UMT method real quick. So how you want to do the UMT method is you align a little bit to the left here, and then trick, hold left while drifting, and then release the UMT and climb up that wall like so, and you will have a lot of exit speed and end up, in a really good spot to take the rest of the track. And yeah, just some final thoughts on the top 10 tracks. These tracks are fairly popular in competitive play, and these are by far the most tech-heavy tracks that you will encounter in competitive play, and the most tech-heavy tracks in the game in general. So it's very important to learn these tracks and to time trial them, and for the honorable mentions to practice them in versus mode games. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys learned something new about these tracks, and I hope you guys, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, hit the notifications, and I'll see you guys next time.